Notch too was born into the golden grasslands of the Masai Mara, son of one of the most dominant lions the reserve had ever seen. His father, Notch, was already a legend, known for reclaiming territory and ruling with his coalition of 5 powerful sons. Notch too grew up in a world shaped by dominance and bloodlines, where survival was earned through unity and strength. From an early age, he learned to move in the shadow of greatness. The world was not gentle, even for the son of a king. Every day the balance between predator and prey sharpened his instincts. Alongside his brothers, he was taught to hunt, to fight, to wait. The bond between them was not only of blood, it was forged by challenge, hunger, and the ever-present threat of stronger rivals. Notch too was not yet a leader, but the blood of power and legacy flowed through him. As he matured, he came to understand his place. He was not an ordinary lion, he was part of something greater, a dynasty rooted in dominance and territory, but even bloodlines are not immune to the cycle of change in the wild. Storms were gathering on the edge of their land, and soon the order he knew would shatter. The peace of the pride did not last. As Notch aged, younger coalitions rose on the horizon. New rivals, lean and hungry, pushed inward, challenging the kingdom his father had carved from dust and blood. The sons of Notch, once feared, were now hunted. The old king himself could no longer protect the borders. Notch too, with his brothers, faced a reality lions rarely survive: exile. They were driven out, chased beyond the lands they had once ruled. The scent of their old pride now carried the musk of strangers. With each step away, they left behind their cubs, their mates, their history. Exile was not just loss, it was shame, a scar etched not on the body, but in the soul of every lion cast out. For many lions, exile means death. Few survive long without territory, without the protection of the pride structure. But Notch too was no ordinary exile. In the harsh lands beyond the Mara, he adapted. The brothers hunted together, fought together. What had been forged in their youth now became their lifeline. They learned to strike quickly, to avoid patrols of stronger coalitions, to endure. Notch too grew stronger in the shadows. No longer the prince beside a father king, he began to emerge as a leader among exiles. With every small victory, an antelope, brought down, a rival chased away. The fire of return lit brighter in his chest. The fall of their kingdom did not destroy them. It tempered them. In exile, Notch too carried a name that once inspired awe, but names mean little without land, without legacy. Every roar in the distance was a reminder of what had been lost. The weight of being the son of Notch pressed down on him like the African sun, inescapable and scorching. Some nights he hesitated, not out of weakness but out of doubt. Was he meant to rise, or was he only a shadow of a lion greater than himself? Around him, his brothers waited, for opportunity, for direction, for him. Their bond remained, but even among them, Notch too felt the silence of expectation. He remembered the stare of his father, not harsh but heavy with meaning. His father had never explained how to lead, only how to survive. Now, with his lineage fading in the dust, Notch too questioned whether survival was enough. He feared he might never return, not to reclaim land, but to reclaim himself. But in the wild, hesitation kills. And slowly, with time and blood, the shadow became less of a burden and more of a drive. Before exile took them far from the heart of the Mara, Notch too had roamed at his father's side. Notch was not a gentle lion, but he was steady. He ruled, not with constant force, but with timing, patience, and brutal clarity. Every lesson was silent, written in the movement of muscles, in the pause before a charge, in the retreat when odds demanded it. Notch too remembered those lessons now, not as memories but as tools. When to wait in tall grass, when to press forward despite wounds, when to yield territory not out of fear but for future advantage. Notch had taught them not to seek domination for glory, but for survival. In exile, these memories became scripture. Notch too did not lead with rage. He waited, measured, observed. When hyenas circled, he did not waste energy in empty fights. He struck only when the cost was certain. That discipline earned him respect among his brothers. Notch lived long for a lion. He saw his sons fall and rise again. Before the final split between them, he gave no words of farewell, only a stare and a slow, deliberate turn of his head toward the horizon. The challenge was accepted. It was Notch too who engaged first. He met the older alpha head-on, teeth bared, body low. The impact was thunder on grass. Dust exploded. His brothers lunged for the second rival, and chaos followed. Claws tore skin. Blood splashed on stone. Bones cracked beneath weight and fury. The fight was brutal and without pause. Notch too was bitten deep near the shoulder, but he did not fall. Pain was secondary now. He turned the force of his body into the rival's flank, driving him back, then down. His brothers overwhelmed the second male, driving him away, injured and limping. Notch too stood over the fallen lion, not to kill without cause, but to claim. The rival rolled, exposing his neck. The war was over. The land fell quiet. Lionesses emerged from the brush, watching. Cubs cried in the distance. The sun burned above, but for the first time in years, Notch too stood at the center of the Mara, scarred, bleeding, but victorious. He had not inherited his father's kingdom. He had taken it. With the rivals defeated and the core territory reclaimed, the Mara slowly bent to the return of the old bloodline. Lionesses, once scattered, now rejoined under the coalition's rule. Cubs born of foreign males were no longer protected. The laws of the savannah are unforgiving. Lineage must be secured. Dominance must be absolute. Notch the Sektu did not revel in cruelty. But he understood the order of things. The old cubs vanished and new life began. His line would now continue not as memory, but as living strength. The lionesses submitted, not only in fear, but in recognition. These were not reckless invaders. These were rulers shaped by fire. Each dawn his roar echoed farther across the plains. Notch too patrolled tirelessly. He marked the land, protected the females, and kept watch for the return of challengers. His brothers shared the weight of power, but it was Notch too they looked to when threat loomed. The Mara was his now, but so was the burden. To reclaim was not the end. It was the beginning. Dominance is never permanent in the wild. To rule is to defend always. New coalitions stirred beyond the borders, and whispers of rebellion moved through the wind. Each victory painted a target on Notch too's back. The years that followed the takeover were not peaceful. Skirmishes erupted on the edges of territory. A brother fell during one ambush, another vanished during the dry season. The coalition, once five, began to shrink. Notch too endured. His wounds healed slower. His body carried more weight. Yet his presence alone was enough to send young males fleeing. He had become more than a lion. He was the roar that lived in the soil, the shape in the tall grass, the fear in the dark. But the weight pressed down. He was no longer fighting for territory. He was fighting to preserve memory, legacy, blood. The very things his father once held, and now he held them too. The day came when the coalition returned to the place where it all began. Notch, the father, was gone. Whether by old age, injury, or silence, his time had passed. His scent no longer lingered on the grass. The trail had faded. The roar that once silenced valleys no longer echoed. Notch II stood alone on a ridge overlooking the land his father once ruled. His brothers at his side, fewer now, older, worn. They did not speak, but the silence between them was full of battles, blood, and a name that meant more now than it ever had. He realized then that he had lived half his life under the shadow of another lion. The rest he had spent building a legacy of his own. What he reclaimed was not his father's kingdom, it was something new, something he had shaped with tooth and claw. In that silence, Notch too was no longer the son, he was the king. Notch too's story did not end with his last battle or his last patrol. It lived on in the cubs that carried his blood, in the lionesses that bore his scent, in the vast silence of the Mara that once again knew his name. He had no crown, no stone to mark his grave, but his life was etched in the movement of generations. In every young male that rose in the Mara, there was a fragment of the one who came back from exile and reclaimed everything. The wind still carries his story, and the land still remembers his roar. It was enough. Time in exile had carved the brothers into survivors. Scarred but lean, hardened but alert, they moved like wind over stone, silent, unseen. The Mara was no longer theirs, but Notch too understood that to reclaim any future, they had to test the edge of danger. They crossed into the territory of a younger coalition. The scent was sharp, fresh kills, marking trails, patrols. But necessity drowned fear. The brothers had not fed in 2 days. Hunger pulled them forward, deeper into enemy land. A herd of wildebeest grazed near the river's bend, unaware of the ghosts stalking through the undergrowth. Notch too took the lead. The wind shifted, the moment sharpened. Muscles tightened in perfect silence. They charged. The dust exploded under their paws, and the chaos of hooves erupted around them. Notch too lunged for the neck of a calf, his grip certain. His brothers flanked and finished. In the space of seconds, the hunger was silenced. Blood spilled on forbidden ground. But the victory was not just in meat. It was a message. The brothers, outcasts, had hunted where others ruled. They left the remains untouched by patrol lines. Territorial defiance. Notch too didn't roar. He didn't need to. The land would carry the scent of his defiance. It was the first step towards something larger. Notch too was never alone. His brothers, born of the same lion, moved with him like extensions of a single will. They were not just a coalition, they were a legacy. And in the wild, no lion survives long without allies. Each brother brought a strength, one swift, another brutal, one clever, another cautious. Notch too learned to use them not just as warriors, but as parts of a greater strategy. He was not the loudest nor the strongest, but when he moved, the others followed. That was power. They began to reclaim land in fragments. A watering hole, here a hunting trail there. They pushed against the boundaries of lesser coalitions, testing resolve. Where they were met with force, they answered with fury. Where they found weakness, they filled the void. Rival males began to recognize the pattern. Outcasts no longer running but advancing. The balance of fear began to shift. Cubs were born into pride lands the brothers overtook. Lionesses began to submit, to mate, to rebuild what was lost. Notch too fought not for dominance alone. He fought for the name, the blood, the right to say they had returned. The bond between the brothers made them more than lions. It made them something nearly unbreakable. As their pride grew, so did their legend. And with every new dawn, more of the Mara remembered the name, Notch. The grasslands were no longer distant. The brothers had pushed closer to the core, the heart of the Mara, where the strongest coalitions ruled. Every poor step forward risked confrontation. The scents were thick now, of dominant males, fresh blood, cubs not of their line. It was sacred ground to others. But Notch too knew this was the moment the future demanded. The Mara did not reward hesitation. It rewarded the bold, the relentless. And his blood carried the memory of a king who had once ruled this very soil. The lionesses they encountered first were guarded, defensive. Some snarled, others fled. But others watched in silence, recognizing something familiar, perhaps in scent, perhaps in posture. The sons of Notch had returned, and the land seemed to know it. The core was not undefended. Rival males patrolled the territory, confident in their hold. They had not expected the return of a coalition forged in exile and sharpened by survival. Notch. They felt the pull of destiny. Not glory, not vengeance, something deeper, a restoration. His paws pressed into the same trails once walked by his father. And ahead, at the center of it all, stood the greatest challenge of his life. The enemy was fierce. 2 males ruled the central territory, larger than most, scarred from years of dominance. Their strength came from experience and familiarity. They knew every ridge, every watering hole, every ambush point, and they knew someone was coming. Notch too didn't attack blindly. He waited, he tracked. The coalition followed him like breath follows lungs, silent, sure. The final confrontation began not with roars, but with stares across dry earth. Lions do not bluff. When they meet eye to eye, something ancient speaks through muscle and instinct.